Hello. The thematic of this lesson will be all black systems where he's playing bishop c5. There are different move orders, but all in all, when black tries to develop the bishop on c5, of course, the main move order is this, the most popular one. Of course, obviously, the bishop on this diagonal, well, very often it goes to b6 after it's more active than on e7 and putting some pressure on white center because white pretty often is playing c3, d4. So it makes a lot of sense, of course, to develop the bishop on this to this diagonal. The drawback of it is that, of course, black is losing some tempis. Again, white can try to play c3, d4, so which will force black to lose a tempi, moving his bishop from c5. And, well, basically, it's pretty much about if black is in time, to develop normally, having the bishop on b6, d6, castle, just to... so if he manages, then normally having a bishop on this diagonal is better than having the bishop on e7. Well, especially when black is playing d6. Yeah, we are talking about black playing d6. There is, of course, bishop e7 and then followed by d5, the marshal, which we are going to consider later in this course. But otherwise, if black puts the pawn on d6, of course, bishop on e7 is quite limited. And of course, having this bishop somewhere on b6 is much more, seems to that most likely black will get a better version of typical Ruy Lopez, something similar, by the way, to the Italian defense. If you remember that there is a system where black plays after bishop third, bishop c4, is playing knight f6, d3, bishop e7. In general, most of players are trying to put the bishop on c5. So a very direct system. What is good about this system that the play is quite easy. Black's play is easy. A very healthy natural development. The minus is that you need to, if you want to play all those bishop c5 lines, you need to know quite a lot, and it's definitely more risky than playing bishop e7. It's much less solid, but at the same time, again, much more demanding for white. Yeah, so white has to really show something now on bishop c5. Here, well, there are not that many strategical aspects in this variation, so I will try to give you certain directions again. What are the most dangerous ideas for white? And I think at the moment this bishop c5 system is doing well according to the theory, but there are some lines where I have a feeling that it's not impossible that white will find some, if not advantage, but at least some unpleasant ideas and plans. And so I'm not 100% sure that this bishop c5 system is bulletproof. But again, for now, I don't see, checking the state of modern theory, I don't see any clear way for white to get an advantage. So let me tell you something about the history of this variation. Actually, it started with b5, bishop b3, bishop b7. For quite some time, that was supposed to be the only way to manage finally to develop the bishop on c5. It's actually playable. Also, I want immediately to attract your attention that it's perfectly playable variation, and sometimes it's played even by Magnus Carlsen played it sometimes. There is nothing really wrong with it. What is important here is that after bishop b7, of course, d4 seems to be a very dangerous move, but now knight takes d4 is working well according to theory, and it looks dangerous. For instance, white has bishop takes f7 check, king takes f7, knight takes e5 check, but then king g8, queen takes d4, c5, queen d1, let's say, and I think something like queen e8. Actually, it's perfectly fine for black this position. So that is important. And also knight takes d4, e d4. It seems that everything works tactically, and black is fine here. The bishop, of course, now white has two main ideas. One is rook e1. Then black's idea is to have the bishop on c5. Otherwise, it's not clear why black is hurrying, having his bishop on b7. For instance, if bishop e7 doesn't make much sense, not even mentioning that maybe some direct moves like d4 can be quite annoying. So obviously the idea is to play bishop c5 and then c3, d6, d4, bishop b6. So this position will actually, it's very much like the main line of bishop c5 system, which we are going to go through during this lesson. It's only that bishop is a bit too early on b7. I mean, it's nothing dramatic, but as you will see, most of the time black is trying to keep it on c8. First of all, it gives a possibility for black to play bishop g4 very often, pinning and putting some even more pressure on white's center. Therefore, white might have to lose tempi playing h3. Here, again, it's not bad, it's playable, but it's sort of a slightly better version for white of typical lines of bishop c5 system. And maybe it can pretend to be slightly better. For example, bishop e3, knight d2, and you will see that in this position, bishop is on c8 usually. There is a system I will show you now. Bishop is usually staying on c8 and actually not always going to b7. So that is one thing which is in favor of playing actually 6 bishop c5 immediately. Another point is d3. That is, by the way, in general, the concept of in Ruy-Lopez. Very important for you to know it, to understand that normally if white plays d3, if white doesn't try to play d4, all those lines, and they are now quite popular, this kind of Ruy-Lopez, just trying to play d3, c3, d3, a3. Not actually not because d3 is better than d4, but just that many lines, as you will see, when white is trying to push d4, somehow leads to kind of forced draw. So now white very often tries to play it slow with d3. Then, of course, bishop is usually better on c8. I mean, yeah, you can put it on b7, but there is no need, because quite often then when black plays d6, he's trying to exchange his bishop to play bishop e6. So all in all, here d3, if after bishop c5 d3 is quite harmless, because black will just never play bishop b7, here d3 is already quite a serious move. Again, bishop c5, and now white, first of all, white can play a4, which will transpose to the variation we are going to analyze today, but also has some other interesting options, like maybe bishop g5, or even something like knight c3, for instance, castles, bishop d2, d6, knight d5, also possible. Again, all those lines when bishop is on c8 are usually quite harmless. With bishop on b7, which is having which is blocked by this pawn chain, d3, e4, those positions are a little bit more dangerous, not so easy for black to equalize. But again, bishop b7 is playable. It's just that once, I think it was beginning of 90s when people started to play bishop c5. Actually, what happened is that they realized that, in fact, it was considered to be bad because of c3, d6, d4, and bishop b6, d5. Yeah, and then you just lose a pawn. And I want to again to remind you that that was era before computers. So then everybody would stop here and the common conclusion was that bishop c5 is just not playable because of that. But then somebody realized that actually it's okay. Knight takes c5, takes, queen d8, king d8, bishop takes f7. And of course, knight takes c4 is not working because of bishop d5. But black has rook f8 move. Rook f8, and now everything works. So after bishop d5, takes, bishop b7.
And black is in time in every line to taking back this pawn finally, and is not worse at all. So that was a day when somebody, and I think it was actually a very talented chess player, not very well known. His name is Yurtaev, who had found it and actually started to develop this variation. Started this fashion, which still continues for already I don't know how many years. This variation with bishop c5 immediately. Before playing bishop b7. So that is a tactical justification of the line. Then let's say if c3, d6, d4, bishop b6, so d5 is given nothing. a4 here is, at least black can play whether rook b8, whether bishop b7, which will transpose to those main lines we are going to consider. But I think here already bishop g4 is perfectly fine. So that is why also important to know that if you want to play a4, and this is considered to be the main line for white, then you should rather try to do it here. That is important, that black doesn't have this bishop g4 plan, and forcing black to make up his mind what he is going to do with this b5 pawn. And black has usually, two major ways of playing, rook b8 or bishop b7. Because actually before here is not good already, knight takes e5, knight takes e5, d4, and in this position white is actually better, so before is not playable. Very important that after takes d6, so without a4 before, this is the main line and supposed to be fine, but here the pawn on b4 is hanging, so this is not good for black before. So basically, which leaves black with only choice of playing bishop b7 or rook b8. But first, before going there, so let's check knight takes e5, takes d4, then takes and d6. You can check. There are quite some games on this position. It seems to be completely harmless. Black is perfectly fine because he's having this c5, c4 threat. At least if you want to play knight takes e5 with white, there is more danger for black if a4, let's say black plays rook b8, which is the main line in this position, the most popular move. At least here, knight takes e5. You should play takes d4, takes d6, and here there is more venom in it because at the end of the day, let's say a b, there is a line, and also c5, c4 is not winning the bishop. So white has different options here. f4, of course, is the main move. Black is playing knight c6, etc. I think again, black is doing fine here. Of course, it's a very principled way of playing. Knight takes c5 here on move 7 or on move 8. But if that would be a refutation of bishop c5, then bishop c5 would already disappear from tournament practice. So I'm pretty sure that this is not a refutation. That black is able to equalize in this position. But again, it's not so harmless. So if you are playing black, you need to study it a bit. Even recently, I've seen a game, I think in the last tournament in Stavanger 2021, there was a game, I think a4 rook b8 in this position. Nepomniachtchi Firuja, and Nepomniachtchi found some little idea at least and got some small plus out of the opening. So anyway, this has to be checked definitely, but I don't believe it's going to be a refutation, obviously. Then white can just play instead of a4, c3, as I mentioned already, d6, d4, bishop b6, and bishop e3. This system is, by the way, it's not very popular, but actually I can recommend you. I recommend to consider it, at least playing white, because it's very solid. It's not easy to equalize with black, and you don't need to learn all those lines, lots of force variations after a4. So a very solid system. I think I had it in mind myself. Playing, if I would face this variation with white, I thought that I would maybe sometimes try this bishop e3. Because what is important that bishop g4, a typical reaction, is not so, probably doesn't fully equalize, because white can play knight d2. here, and somehow it all works tactically. Don't ask me why, but for some reason taking this pawn on d4 is not working so well. So usually castles. And now h3, bishop h5, and d takes e5. And all in all, in this position, again, I'm not sure it is much for white. Probably black is very close to equalize, but still it's not so simple. So that's why most of the time black just castles here. Now knight bd2. Actually, h3, this you can also do via this move for the h3 castles bishop e3. So, and just to avoid bishop g4 and to try to get to the same position. But then black has, on top of course, normal moves like h6 or rook e8, black actually has this typical tactics, which also for this variation, which important to know, it's a very typical idea. Knight takes e4, looks like after bishop d5, queen e8, queen c2, it's time to resign, but in fact there is knight b4 move. Queen takes e4, takes, and d5, and suddenly the bishop on e4 is trapped, and black is fine in this position. So that's why white should start with knight bd2 if he wants to fight for some opening advantage. So now, of course, knight g4 is not working because of bishop g5. Doesn't make sense. That's why black usually plays h6, already threatening knight g4. White is playing h3, and here this typical position. Again, you see that compared to this Arkhangelsk variation with early bishop b7, yeah, I actually don't need my bishop on b7 yet, at least here. And so I think rook e8 is usually played. White is playing bishop c2 or rook e1. It leads to more or less the same type of position. Let's say bishop c2, I think, is more common continuation. And black has here, a different way of playing. One is just to play solid, just to play quietly, like rook b8. Of course, rook e1 and let's say bishop d7. Of course, white has a center, but again, you see the big difference compared to those positions where black's bishop is on f8 here. Then usually white has a very comfortable and nice advantage. With the bishop on b6, things are not so easy because the bishop is active, and in general, well, it is playable. Maybe it's a little bit better for white, but no big deal. So to say, it's definitely not bad for black also. Perfectly playable, but as far, I think that ed4 actually here is enough to equalize, even if you need to know some theory here. So ed4, cd4, knight a5, a very little bit strange way of playing, but the point is that black is just trying to attack the center very, very directly, just to attack the pawn on e4. So rook e1, bishop b7. So this position can also happen via here rook e1 move further, and then you get to the same story: ed, cd, knight a5, bishop c2, bishop b7. So a very important position in this theory, and it seems that black is equalizing here because the pawn on e4 is hanging. Once d5 is played, then always c6 comes. I don't know if taking first on e3 or immediately c6. Very typical also idea, just breaking in the center, or queen b1. This is another move. Not so easy otherwise to protect the pawn on e4, and black is just in time to have knight c4, takes, and after d5, c6. So still that couple of accurate moves are still required from black to equalize here, but in general, this is probably enough for black to equalize this position. So not a big deal, this variation, bishop e3. I wouldn't say that it's extremely dangerous, but still white has full control here, and black, at least he manages to keep the center, and black needs to know what he is doing here. So bishop e3 is quite an important line. For some reason, quite a rare guess nowadays in the top level chess, in the grandmaster practice. I think that it's it's a little bit underestimated, this bishop e3 system. Worth trying. Playing with white, was trying to analyze it and maybe to have it as a weapon, because there are not so many actually
attractive weapons in this bishop c5 variation. So basically, to have at least something that you can play a game, you can try to get a very small advantage and press a bit. This already something, nowadays in Ruy Lopez, with all those computers which are more and more, finding more and more ways to equalize in different Ruy Lopez lines. So not a bad choice from time to time to play bishop e3. But the main move by far is a4. And now, again, before, as I've mentioned already, is simply not good. So the choice is to play bishop b7 or rook b8 here. Rook b8 is much more popular, but bishop b7 is not bad, actually. I wouldn't say it's bad. But of course, white has here quite a number of options. I mean, it's not so bulletproof bishop b7 move, because first of all, knight takes e5 probably doesn't make much difference. Takes d6. It seems that bishop on b7 is no worse than rook on b8. If black plays rook b8, so I don't think this is too dangerous for black. But here, d3 or c3, both moves are quite dangerous. Actually, d3 is more positional way of playing. c3 is very direct, and some quite sharp variations can occur on the board after c3. So d3, castles. Yes, and now for quite a long time, knight c3 was the main move. It's true, it's very principal move. Actually, I played this with black, this position. Exactly, I think we have this move order against Garry Kasparov, actually, in the World Championship match. If I remember correctly, it was game 11. So we went straight to this endgame, knight a5. And now the idea is that if bishop a2, then black seems to be in time with b4, knight e2, d5, just in time to equalize here. So that's why white is taking ab, knight takes b3, cb3, takes, knight e5, d5, bishop g5, and you can see there is a long theory here, many games in the end of 90s, and it seems that nowadays computers actually are finding some ways to make a draw here with black. I also managed to make a draw. So this line is, it's safe for white, but no more than that. Probably it doesn't give much. But white has some ideas here. I mean, as always, when has pawn on d3 and black the bishop on b7, there are always some ideas for positional play. For instance, I consider a move like bishop e3 may be interesting. I thought that, it's possible. It leads to sort of Italian, but a better version, again, because the bishop is on b7. So I would consider a move like bishop e3, for instance, takes, d6, and maybe queen e1, just stopping knight a5 ideas. And I have a feeling that sooner or later black will have to retreat maybe his bishop from b7 to c8 at some point. So white has some potential in this position. I think it's perfectly playable. Some knight h4, knight f5 ideas, some play on the king side. For example, white has also other options here. I even saw somebody playing bishop d2 here, trying to stop knight a5. A little bit strange move, but maybe still possible. So all in all, d3 is a serious move here. But the most direct approach is c3. And here again, sorry to repeat it again and again, in many Ruy Lopez lines, that you need quite a powerful machine engine to understand what is going on here in the main lines, because the game gets very, very direct after c3. So usually d6 is played, d4, bishop b6. And now, because the bishop is on b7, first of all, white has this option to play bishop g5, which was considered to be quite annoying, I would say, for black in the 90s, again, when computers were much weaker, or non-existent even, beginning of 90s. Takes bishop d5. This pin is pretty unpleasant. Castle, knight a3, but e4, cd4, and now rook b8 or rook a7 even is played. I think rook b8 is the best move. According to theory, looks not very
convincing, I would say, for black, but nowadays computers cannot actually find anything special for white. So it seems that black is very close to equalize, even if it doesn't look, again, so great. Yeah, this type of play, because black's next is anyway to play, to remove the knight somewhere, to change these bishops, and very often black is playing b takes a4 in this position, just trying to just to secure this bishop on b6 with a bit compromised pawn structure, but somehow, all in all, with a very accurate play, it seems to equalize. And then another attempt is to play rook e1, which is maybe the most dangerous move here. So the question is castles or h6. Of course, castle, the problem is bishop g5. If black is trying to play h6, then bishop e3. And here it seems that black is experiencing some problems, because if castle, then d5 already is unpleasant. You see why the bishop on b7 is sometimes a trouble, because here, for instance, after bishop takes e3, white has intermediate dc6. With a bishop on c8 and rook on b8, that wouldn't be dangerous, of course, but here is winning a piece. That's why it forces black, let's say, to play knight a5 and then to spoil the pawn structure. And I think both bishop c2 here or takes knight a3 looks very dangerous for black. Again, in those variations, much better to have bishop on c8. Then at least black would put him on the bishop on d7. So bishop on b7 here will have to retreat to c8 sooner or later. That's why. And if knight g4, then suddenly bishop d5 is actually very dangerous. Knight takes f3, f takes e3. Of course, an awful pawn structure for white, but castles knight a3, black has just very concrete issues with the b5 pawn, and it seems that, according to theory and computers, seems to be in white's favor, this position. So that's why after rook e1, castles is the main move. And here, yeah, again, if h3, h6, everything would be quite okay, but the main issue is bishop g5. And again, I really don't know. I've analyzed this position some time ago with less powerful engines, but the position is so complicated that you need to check it with more and more powerful engines. And hard to say, maybe assessment will change at some point, because black kind of has to play g5, otherwise it just cannot really get rid of this pin. It seems, I mean, if he wants to equalize, otherwise, of course, he can maybe make some moves like queen e7, but I think the only principal way is ed4, g5, or immediately g5, and then knight takes g5. This is a very critical move, hg, bishop g5, and, well, I have quite a number of computer games here, like 10 years old computer games, and even computers are not totally sure about this position. What is the final outcome? Is it a draw finally? If black holding a draw or not? I think knight takes d4 is supposed to be the best move, and now white is playing bishop d5, and you need to analyze this position. Knight e6, if I remember correctly, a move. This strange move is the best. White can play bishop h4, so very strange position, very dangerous, because you see one of the white's ideas is rook a3, very typical for Ruy Lopez. Rook a3, rook g3. Okay, if this position is holdable, then the whole variation is probably pretty playable, even though white has, as I mentioned already, this option to play bishop g5, an option to play instead of c3, d3. So bishop e7 is not refuted. This variation is not refuted, definitely. But nowadays, anyway, rook b8 is supposed to be, well, much more popular. And actually, it's true that rook b8 is, is quite logical in a way, because first of all, the pawn on b5 is protected, and the bishop, very important, can go to this diagonal to g4 one day. So that is now the the played in at least on top level chess, played almost like 9 games out of 10, which rook b8. So now what, knight takes e5 I've shown you already. This position is definitely needs to be analyzed, especially if you're playing this variation with black, but it seems that black is
in time to equalize in all lines here. Then, well, now, of course, if white is playing d3, again, I already mentioned black simply plays d6, and with the bishop on c8, black has no problem at all. It's just simply equal. So basically, white's probably only chance, real chance to fight for advantage is to play c3, d6, d4, bishop b6. A very important position here. Again, d5 doesn't bring much. Knight takes e5, the same story. Black is just in time to take back the pawn. So what are the options? Of course, if white is playing slow fashion, h3, castles, bishop e3, h6, for instance, actually it's better for white if he wants already to play this bishop e3 system. I think it's better to avoid playing a4, rook b8. It's just in black's favor. For instance, rook e8, rook e1, and here, for example, black has b4, and his rook on b8 is very good, actually creating counterplay on the b line. So this doesn't make much sense. Then already just play on move 7, c3, d4, bishop e3. So what is the theory? The main line here, I think bishop g5 also is not too dangerous here because h6 and then g5 coming. There are some options that white tried almost everything already in this variation, obviously, but I don't think there is anything which is too dangerous, especially if you have an engine. If you study this line with black, I don't think there was anything really which can trouble you besides those lines which I show. So knight a3 is actually the main line. The main line. I don't know. I actually consider maybe a5 very strange move. a5 is also very dangerous, maybe even more dangerous than knight a3, because knight a3, of course, it is dangerous. Don't misunderstand me, but the theory here has developed so much that basically there is not much play after knight a3 in this position. It's so direct play that if you study it carefully, you have good analysis and good memory. Well, it seems that at this moment of time, in every line, black is holding, and having enough counterplay. So that's why if you are white, okay, if you want to play knight a3, then you need to have an idea, certain idea what to do in all those very forced lines of this variation, whether you already play some other system. Because here knight a3, castles is played usually. Well, you can start with bishop g4, but anyway, white just takes the pawn and black has nothing better than castling. So let's say castles, a, b, knight takes b5. That's the only idea why knight a3 is played. And now bishop g4. This is a tabia. Again, lots of tries. I remember I played myself. I actually won against Veselin Topalov in Rapid Chess Monaco 2004, also in this variation. At that time, again, computers were not so powerful, so and the practice, there was much less games in this variation. So it was still not clear if black has enough or not. There was quite some unexplored territories. Now, again, especially with the help of thousands of computer games, it's maybe, I don't know, I had a feeling again that it's almost sterilized now. Almost every sensible move in the position was already tried and played, I don't know, by among computers. It's difficult to find something here, and I think that bishop c2 is the main line. And it seems that black is holding in every line here. But again, I don't know, you can investigate. Of course, after all, white is pawn up. You see, black is very active. Yeah, that is the point, that he sacrificed the pawn, but he's extremely fantastic development, great pressure on the center. And that is a compensation of black. Well, definitely black is not pretending to fight for anything than just equality. But probably if you know theory well, you will probably manage to equalize. Bishop takes f3 is the main move. For example, if I remember correctly, after d5, h3 is a very important move, and actually h3 poses a lot of problems for black. So
bishop f3. The problem that white's problem that, of course, if he takes with the queen, then just black takes the pawn back. So gf and knight h5. And here black just wants to create his counterplay, just knight e7, knight g6, sometimes queen h4, so just to have a very strong positional compensation. That's why white should probably try to do something about it. So one way of playing is f4. Okay, giving back this pawn, let's say takes, but at least now the center is powerful, and the bishop on b6 is a little bit, for the moment, out of play, even though black, of course, will try to remove his knight from c6 and play c5. Was quite fashionable for a while, playing something like this, queen g4, but again, well, a lot of computer games analysis seems that black is doing fine. For example, one of the ways is knight e7, queen takes f4, and actually f5. Again, according to engines, black has enough counterplay in this position. Or another way of playing is d takes e5. Of course, if d takes e5, black just wants to change queens. Knight takes e5 then f4, but then queen h4 here. Yeah, here you better be prepared playing this variation, because ed6, knight e5, not something which is easy to find, or at least to be sure that it works, but it seems that it does work. Knight e5, king g2, c takes d6, knight d4, for instance, one of the main lines according to engine. Bishop takes d4, c d4, knight g6, king h1, knight hf4. Not obvious at all. White has two bishops, 2 pawns up, but what can we say? I mean, computers pretend that black has enough counterplay here, and is trying. I think the main move is bishop e3. Black can just take the pawn back and finally have enough compensation for a draw. No more than that. I mean, if white knows the theory. But it seems that, of course, white has quite a number of other options, like d5 is another variation, knight e7, now trying to protect this pawn on e4. There is a number of variations here possible, but again, it seems that black is doing fine according to nowadays theory. That's why actually I would recommend you with white to pay a lot of attention on the a5 move, which practically forces black to play bishop a7, because knight a5, suddenly rook takes a5, bishop a5, d5. Chess is a strange game. It seems like white is absolutely not ready with most of his pieces on the first rank to get that aggressive, to sacrifice an exchange, but it works. It works, and it seems that white is better here. Knight g4, bishop g5, and so on. This is not good for black. It's not actually practically not playable. I think the idea is that if queen d7, I think white has e6 and knight d4, something like that. So checked by machines already. Machines play bishop a7 as practically only move, so you can be sure that this is correct. Bishop a7, and now h3. So you see the same type of game as I've shown you after bishop a3, only that white has a bit more, control, so to say, on the queen side, and black doesn't have this knight a5 idea quite often. Well, the drawback is that the pawn on a5 sometimes can be hanging. So the same type of play, maybe a little bit better version for white compared to the immediate bishop e3 variation. So here h3 is played usually. The thing is that if you start with bishop e3, already here bishop g4 works pretty well. Again, don't ask me why, because it's very direct. The play, for some reason, I think after knight bd2, you can already take the pawn on d4. Without a4, you remember we had the same position, then black should rather castle instead. Here, I think you can take. So that's why anyways the theory goes d5. Here, bishop takes f3, queen takes f3, knight takes e5, queen e2, exchanging the bishops, let's say castle, knight d2, rook e8. This type of game, rook d1, queen e7, well, white maybe is very, very slightly nominally a bit better because he has a bishop, a bit more space, but in general you see black has no weaknesses really, and
healthy position, so not very dangerous. That's why after bishop a7, h3 is supposed to be the main move. And so now that is, by the way, quite an important position nowadays. It's still not quite clear what is black's best here. So normally black castles here, but castles, and that was supposed to be fine, again, until some new engines came, much stronger and actually much less materialistic, so ready to sacrifice pawns for long-term initiative. And then they changed, in quite a number of opening lines, different openings, they changed the assessment of the position. And if I remember well, it was considered to be, castle was considered to be perfectly fine some good 10 years ago, bishop e3, and now just ed4. cd4, knight takes e4, queen c2, queen e8. So you know already this idea that after bishop d5, again, there is knight b4, takes, and f5, even better than d5, and black is fine here. So that's why this a5, h3 castle was supposed to be a good way of playing. But nowadays I see that computers are just playing knight c3 and actually playing for compensation here. And you need to analyze it, of course, on your own, but there are not so many human games in this position, but the computer statistics is frightening. It's like 70% for white here. So it looks like it's really dangerous, probably, this initiative. And it's true, I can understand, because it's bishop on a7, especially if once black, if he takes on c3, you can take maybe with a pawn, even or queen. I mean, this bishop is very difficult to get the bishop back into play. And white has this very powerful diagonal, bishop on b3. So I don't know, maybe it's holdable, but it seems to me that it's extremely dangerous. That's why after bishop e3, probably, because white also wants to take d5. This is the idea. Let's say if you play h6, now, immediately or move after, there is d5, and if bishop e3, there is ef6, and then followed by fg7. So maybe black should, strangely enough, play rook a8 back. I understand a very strange play, but still white also lost some time moving his pawn to a5. So rook e8, that is playable. Knight bd2, h6, let's say queen c2, rook e8. Again, the same type of position, but I think that white, it's very complex, very, complicated position, but probably white has some chances for some opening advantage here. I mean, it's definitely playable for white, but after castle bishop e3, probably this rook e8 followed by h6, rook e8 is the best way probably for black to proceed. And I've checked my notes, like 10 years old notes, and that was the way I wanted to play. I mean, I thought it was the best way for black to play, but I was not totally sure if this is objectively enough to equalize. But of course, it's a complicated position. So, but now I see that bishop b7 lately became fashionable already here. It was supposed to be not great, but again, new computers are coming, and some things, some evaluations are changing. So bishop b7, a strange move, but it's just extremely direct. So I will show you why, because let's say if rook e1 castles, now I guess the idea that if bishop e3, that black can maybe first take on d4, but you can probably just attack this e4 pawn and take this e4 pawn immediately. So bishop g5, h6, bishop h4, g5. Now already knight takes g5 doesn't work so well. I mean, the same story, or ed, maybe ed, cd, g5, whatever is the best move further. Again, you need to understand why, and all those small issues, why with a rook on a8 it was dangerous, with a rook on b8, I suspect, because this bishop d5 move is not anymore, your bishop is not hanging on b7 anymore. Very tactical, of course, this whole story. But all in all, that after ed, cd, g5, white is playing bishop g3 here already, and then knight h5, still very sharp position. But, again, black is very active, and it seems that black is doing fine here. But the serious test is bishop e3, because now d5 is a threat. So black actually, again, yeah, the problem is that if castle, then white simply plays d5, and again d takes c6, winning a piece. And now knight takes c4. And I think there was recently a game, if I remember correctly, even in the World Cup, Sochi 2021, this very forcing variation. So d5, well, it's still, the last word hasn't been said yet, if it's a draw or not draw. I don't know. Even computers in the blitz games, not so many in this position, but you know, sometimes white wins, sometimes it's a draw, more draws than wins, but I don't know yet. But I just want to tell you, to show you this important line, that it's quite important, but you can maybe analyze it yourself and try to see what is the final outcome. So bishop takes c3, dc6, knight takes f2, queen e2, of course a crazy position. As you see already in general, this variation you better don't play, especially against prepared opponent, having black. You don't play it just over the board. You have really to be prepared. Knight takes h3 check, king h1, knight f2 check, rook takes f2. I mean, I'm showing you this line because it is important, and because it's a line which is very difficult to play over the board. I mean, to play like this, bishop f2, queen f2, now bishop c8, looks like, well, it's just lost, bishop f7 check or something, but I don't know. I don't know why, but it seems that nothing, I mean, it's working, it's not losing. Don't ask me why. So knight takes e5 now, castles, knight takes f7 and d5. At least I'm showing you some computer game in my database, and finally white was still trying, but finally it ended in a draw. I don't know, again, so that is a line to analyze. But all in all, maybe this a5 is quite a dangerous, quite a serious try. Even though I see, well, quite often top players are still playing this bishop c5 variation, and actually, I mean, they're not afraid of this a5 move, but I guess you need serious preparation to play it, I mean, with both colors. But I wouldn't say that it's totally empty. I mean, maybe even if the state of theory is quite favorable for black at the current moment, but as you see, white has ideas, so it's not so simple, this line. And then what I want to come back to the beginning, and then I want to show you that actually there is an interesting bishop c5 move order. I played it myself once or twice. The point is that, okay, white can actually take on e5 again, but then takes, the same story, d4, now black can just play b5. And actually it seems to be perfectly fine for black, because white has nothing better than bishop b3, and then you transpose to this variation, but you avoid a4 rook b8 line. I mean, you avoid the same position with a4 and rook b8 played. So knight e5 is considered to be not too dangerous. So what is the point of playing bishop c5? That you can avoid some lines. I mean, you give white some additional line, I'm sure, and quite a big one, quite a serious one. But again, according to the modern state of theory, it seems that black is holding there, even though not without some difficulties. But you avoid some other lines. So it's like a little bit a side subline of bishop c5 system, but actually it has also a separate value also. So you can play it, if you want to play with black, you can play b5, bishop c5, but you can also play bishop c5, and it can transpose one to another in some lines, but you can also play it as a separate system. I will show you now what I mean. So bishop c5, c3. And now, first of all, lately I see some players are playing, even, again, Magnus Carlsen in rapid chess, mainly, but playing this system, castle, d4, bishop a7. Well, I never really studied it. In my time, when I studied Ruy Lopez, some good
good 15, 20 years ago, it was considered to be, practically bad. I still believe it's pretty dubious, but I see some players from time to time playing it. I guess if the system, my guess is very simple, logical, I'm like Sherlock Holmes, so deductive thinking. So if that would be good, everybody would play it all the time with black. But so I guess since it's just a very rare guest in some rapid blitz chess, I suppose it's not a great system, but still not so easy. Because, the idea is, of course, if d e94, if rook e1, then black is playing d6. Still, as usual, you can always take an h3. Probably it's playable for white. But the main test is bishop g5. Bishop g5 here. And, again, 20 years ago, it was considered to be almost like winning by force. Now I see that some strong players are going for this line. So I guess it's not that bad. The idea is that after h6, bishop h4, let's say ed4, if you play like this, then on top of the transposing to the main line, cd4, there is some very strange move, queen c1. I guess, this pin is terribly dangerous, and the idea is that after g5 that you can just take on g5. So maybe for black it's better to start with ed4. A very, very dangerous line, of course. Only with computers you can play like this. And e5, h6, seems to be takes, cd, rook e8, rook e1, exchanging on f5 and d6, probably holding for black. At least computers are having, close to 50% statistics here with black. But actually cd4, h6, bishop h4 probably is the most dangerous try. I don't know, g5, again, at least computer statistics, I have a database of computer games, and sometimes it's, especially in such sharp lines, it's very important, because they don't blunder and they calculate well. So I think here, according to my database, white has a huge statistics. So probably it means it is bad for black. I don't know. Again, has to be checked, because some of those games are like 15 years old. Some computers were a bit weaker at that time, but it's frightening in such a sharp position to have over 80% statistics. It's probably means something. So I guess it's not good. But black can play d6. A very strange way. Still, let's say white can play something like this, takes knight d2 or some other way of playing. I suppose that it is not too bad, but again, first of all, it doesn't look good. It's very dangerous, looks extremely dangerous, and this line you can only play if you really analyze every single move, because to play under this pin and just to start to understand and calculate over the board if g5, knight g5, sometimes if it wins or it doesn't win, not my cup of tea. I better prepare it at home, but in general I suspect this line is a bit dubious. At least a bit dubious. So but normally c3 b5. So you see, the idea is that now of course bishop c2 is a separate kind of line. But if white plays bishop b3, then at least black had avoided quite a number of lines. So black is playing d6 here already. And for instance, this a4 knight takes e5 line, immediately knight e5 after b5 bishop c5. So black has avoided quite a number of lines. And on top of everything, after a4, which is still considered to be the main line, now black, of course, can still play both bishop b7 and rook b8. By the way, if black is playing bishop b7, then he also avoided the variations with d3, followed by knight c3 and so on, so without c3. So, but black also has two separate options. One is bishop g4, which is slightly maybe dubious, but not so clear, not so easy. Also, this line, I think usually white is just trying to put pawn on d3 already here and playing slowly, because, let's say h3, black can take on f3. Sometimes playing like this actually is not too bad, because he has some b4, some knight a5, some counterplay on the queen side, even though still, I believe it considers to be slightly in white's favor. But And another variation which I myself played, which is b4. This is totally new thing, very computerish way of playing. d4, and now bishop a7. Don't ask me why, but bishop b6 was really bad. But bishop a7, and it looks terrible. But yeah, there is no clear refutation. At least I played it with Jan Nepomniachtchi, I think in Dortmund, 2018. Probably, yes. Actually, I lost the game at the end of the day, but I had a normal position out of the opening. I don't know. There was not so much developments in this variation. But again, it was more an idea of surprise, to surprise my opponent, because it was completely new at that time. I had doubts if it's objectively sound, but not so easy. I couldn't really find refutation again, so this you can analyze it. So what I mean is that if you play bishop c5, c3, b5, bishop b3, that you don't necessarily have to move to, to transfer to this rook b8 to bishop b7 variation. But the most important test is bishop c2. So of course, if here bishop c2, black has to play d5. Okay, d6, d4, this is already simply practically a tempi up. Let's say white can just play quietly bishop e3, knight d2, and it's practically a tempi, and white is definitely slightly better here. So the idea is bishop c2, d5. So if this system is holding for black, if black is doing fine here, then I see no reason to start with b5. I think it's much more convenient to start with bishop c5. But of course, here you need to learn a lot. You really need to learn a lot. And again, as I understand, it seems to hold every line here. There are a lot of very direct, very long forced lines. So without a very high level preparation, you better don't go here, or without a good memory, because you need to memorize long lines. Again, I think it's holding well on a professional level. So there are many. White has some strange move a4. You can check, there are many games of top players, including Caruana and so on. Very, very long line. I think up to move 30, 35. But according to the modern state of theory, I think black is holding here. Then there are some ideas like ed5, queen d5, d4, ed4, and some rook e1 check, but also doesn't seem to bring anything for white. So the main move is d4, and now d takes e4. And white has a number of options. Again, this you just need to check games. The play is extremely direct, so the computer, the explanations of your engine will be more useful than my explanations here, because there is not much to explain. You just need to push the button and to memorize the variations, but I just give you the directions. For instance, white has a number of choices. d5 is one of the options. Then black takes on f3, ef, gf, and as dangerous as it looks, but it's holding according to engines. Another idea is very strange, knight bd2, but actually quite dangerous. Knight bd2, and now probably black's best is ef, queen f3. So white is taking the piece back. Bishop e7. So you really need to know lines here. Yeah, you need to remember it well. Takes bishop d7, queen f3, takes knight e4, and it's still going on the theory, but it seems that black is just in time to equalize. And the main move is knight takes e5, knight takes e5. I think d5 was old main line. Nowadays, I saw quite a number of games. White is trying to get something after dc5. Usually black is playing knight d3, and a very unbalanced position where, in my opinion, black is holding it quite. But you need, again, it's very difficult position to play, so you better just analyze it. But it's quite interesting for white. I mean, at least as a try, even if it doesn't give objectively an advantage, but things are not easy for black here. And d5 is, old main line, queen d1, rook d1, knight g4. And again, I just show you the main line here, just for your information. But of course, you need to work on it. So bishop takes e4, knight takes f2, check, king e7, rook d5, bishop b6,
bishop e8. I mean, black moves are completely forced here. White has some choices, also not so much, but black is practically forced to do this. Takes, knight a3, bishop e6, rook takes e1, rook takes a8, rook d3, and white is exchange up, but his bishop is bad. The knight on a3 is pretty bad, and actually with these two bishops and very powerful diagonals, it seems that here, and this is approved by computer and a big number of computer games, that black seems to hold here. Bishop f5, rook g3. Actually, rook is actually difficult to find a square for the rook, because always attacked by the bishop. So usually rook g3, and now rook d8, knight c2, rook d2, knight d4, and for some reason, of course, bishop g6 is a possible move, but for some reason, bishop e4 is more precise, and here black is doing fine. So all in all, again, bishop c5. If this position after d5, if you want to analyze it and all those lines, and you're sure it's doing well, then I would advise you at least to start with bishop c5, and then in case of c3, in case if white is playing like this, then you already choose where you want to play bishop b7, rook b8, or maybe other lines like before bishop g4. Well, one thing what I can then tell that from the white side, at least you can always have this position, I mean d4, so this and bishop e3. This variation, maybe it's not too dangerous, I mean, but at least you can have it against all move orders, whether black plays b5, bishop c5, or immediately bishop c5. So you can always have it. That is good news. Well, all in all, I think that is more or less the structure of this bishop c5 system. As you see already, you need, like in many, practically all Ruy Lopez nowadays, if you are playing black, there is a choice whether you don't want to study too many forcing lines, you want to play solid and safe, but then most of the time black is slightly worse. In many of those side lines, when black wants just to play d6, bishop e7, etc., not fully equalizing. But if you want really to equalize, to play very principled lines, then, very often you need to study some theory. I mean, again, I'm talking about the professional level. If you're talking on the club, if you're playing on the club level or amateur level, definitely what I've shown you already, that is definitely enough to play any of the systems which we are studying here during this course. But for a professional level, if you want to equalize, you need to work and you need to memorize variations. But again, you see the situation is quite similar in a way to the open Spanish with knight takes e4. So it seems that white doesn't really have any clear way for to get an advantage, but he has a few tries, and I also cannot, cannot be sure that that black will be doing fine, for the next coming, 30 years in this variation. White has some options. So the last word in the theory haven't been said yet in all of those lines, including bishop c5. But of course, it's an interesting line. Again, I want to repeat that bishop c5 is a quite simple line to play. And if you're sure you make a good work, you're sure that you're holding in every variation, then of course it's a very serious weapon with black. Same as in open Spanish knight takes e4 variation. If you're playing white, you need to have something here. But the difference is maybe with Berlin, for example, that here, if you have some interesting novelty, you can really get a serious advantage. If your opponent is not prepared, then, it's quite tactical, the position, and the importance of preparation is much higher than in Berlin, for example. So that is all about the bishop c5 lines. And now next we are going to move to the classics, bishop e7, which is also, of course, very popular. Also, not easy for white to find an advantage, and we will
yes, slowly go through, well, I'll try to go through all the more or less serious existing systems, but the main one is Marshall. I believe it's now a very important line, and so first I will consider everything else, and then we'll go to the Marshall variation when black sacrifices a pawn, and the same type of play, quite aggressive. I mean, you need to memorize quite a number of lines, but probably objectively it is the best way, the best variation for black in the bishop e7 system.